You can't get accuracy in science now. I know some time ago they told us that when the Bible said that he saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, that couldn't be. The earth was round. But the Bible said 4 corners. Well, now you've seen 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago it's been now, the papers packing this article, they found out that the world is square. How many have seen that? I got it all copied off. You're just waiting for somebody to say something. And they're going to find out someday that they're not seeing 150 million years of light space either. They're going right around the circle. So exactly.
The Bible and the Earth. A pre-thought. The ancient Hebrews had the Urim and Thummim. The Urim and Thummim was the breastplate of Aaron inlaid with the 12 stones, one representing each tribe, similar to birthstones in color. If anyone had a word from God, a spiritual dream, a message, anything for the congregation, they would first present this to the high priest, who wore the Urim and Thummim. If the stones didn't light up or twinkle, it was not of God. It didn't matter how good the message was or how real the dream. Didn't matter the position of the messenger, his title or experience. If those stones didn't dance, the person remained quiet, for the message was not of God. Our 5 senses. It doesn't matter what you saw or think you saw. It doesn't matter what you heard or think you heard. It doesn't matter what you felt or think you felt. It doesn't matter what you smelled or think you smelled, and it doesn't matter what you tasted or think you tasted. All of our senses can be fooled. The ultimate authority. The Bible is our Urim and Thummim, but many Christians, although for the most part well-meaning, do not know or recognize truth. 2 Timothy 2:15 says, "Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth." The word also warns us in 2 Thessalonians 2:3, "Let no man deceive you by any means," and in Ephesians 5:6, "Let no man deceive you with vain words, for because of these things cometh the wrath of God upon the children of disobedience." Bible-backed. Everything we believe or think to be true must be backed up by the Bible, if not our very salvation is in vain. 1 Corinthians 15:2 says, "By this gospel you are saved if you hold firmly to the word I preached to you. Otherwise, you have believed in vain." We cannot take scissors to the Bible and say, "Oh, I like this but not this part." It's all or nothing.
Woe to us. Because you people and 62 million other Americans are listening to me right now. Because less than 3% of you people read books. Because less than 15% of you read newspapers. Because the only truth you know is what you get over this tube. Right now, there is an entire generation that never knew anything that didn't come out of this tube. This tube is the gospel, the ultimate revelation. This tube can make or break presidents, popes, prime ministers. This tube is the most awesome force in the whole godless world. And woe is us if it ever falls into the hands of the wrong people. And when the 12th largest company in the world controls the most awesome propaganda force in the whole godless world, who knows what will be peddled for truth on this network. So you listen to me. Listen to me. Television is not the truth. Television is a amusement park. Television is a circus, a carnival, a traveling troupe of acrobats, storytellers, dancers, singers, jugglers, sideshow freaks, lion tamers, and football players. We're in the boredom-killing business. So if you want the truth, go to God, because that's the only place you're ever going to find any real truth. But man, you're never going to get any truth from us. We'll tell you anything you want to hear. We lie like we'll tell you that Kojak always gets the killer and that nobody ever gets cancer in Archie Bunker's house. And no matter how much trouble the hero is in, don't worry, just look at your watch. At the end of the hour, he's going to win. We'll tell you any you want to hear. We deal in illusions, man. None of it is true. But you people sit there day after day, night after night, all ages, colors, creeds. We're all you know. You're beginning to believe the illusions we're spinning here. You're beginning to think that the tube is reality and that your own lives are unreal. You do whatever the tube tells you. You dress like the tube. You eat like the tube. You raise your children like the tube. You even think like the tube. This is mass madness, you maniacs. In God's name, you people are the real thing. We are the illusion. So turn off your television sets. Turn them off now. Turn them off right now. Turn them off and leave them off. Turn them off right in the middle of the sentence I'm speaking to you now. Turn them off.
Don't believe the TV. You have been lied to and are being brainwashed into believing a fantasy. In fact, most people have been fooled by one photo and one photo only. It was a low-resolution image, and because it was on TV in 1969, it was believed to be the truth over the Word of God. From education to entertainment, the enemy is so good at misleading and is so subtle at giving you false information, that you probably haven't even realized it, yet accept it as truth. Colossians 2:8 says, "Beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit, after the tradition of men, after the rudiments of the world and not after Christ." How many times have you seen this? Importance. Satan is the father of lies, and he wants you to doubt God by doubting God's word, and he'll do anything in his power to accomplish it. You cannot call yourself a child of God if you reject or doubt what God is showing you in his word. Galatians 5:9 says, "A little leaven leavens the whole lump." Even a little doubt can add up. Matthew 11:25 says, "At that time Jesus answered and said, I thank thee, O Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because thou hast hid these things from the wise and prudent, and hast revealed them unto babes." Part 1. The Firmament. Genesis 1:6-9 says, "And God said, Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. And the evening and the morning were the second day." What is a firmament? Strong's Concordance H7549, properly, an expanse, that is the firmament or, apparently, visible arch of the sky. Firmament. Webster's definition of firmament. 1. The vault or arch of the sky, heavens. So this is what we have. Heaven at the top. Water under the heaven. Then the firmament. Then more water. Can it be proven? Yes. If you read between the lines. These two clips show something solid is up there. The first clip is of NASA's SpaceX rocket that explodes in mid-flight when just before the commentator says vehicle is on course, on track, then radio silence. To me it looks like it hit the dome at an angle and skimmed or scraped across the surface, until the rocket's structure could no longer continue. The second clip is of the Go Fast amateur rocket, the fastest and highest amateur rocket ever built, hitting the dome and stopping in mid-flight.
10, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition sequence start and liftoff of the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket, adding to the International Space Station access for future American rockets. And Falcon has cleared the tower. Vehicle propulsion nominal. Vehicle spoiler damage. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition sequence start. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition sequence start. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition sequence start. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition sequence start. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition sequence start. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition sequence start. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition sequence start. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition sequence start. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition sequence start. 10, 9, 8, Convection has begun. T plus 2 minutes. Altitude 32 kilometers. Speed 1 kilometer per second. Downrange distance 13 kilometers.
Eddy coming back shows vehicle on course, on track. Eddy coming back shows vehicle on course, on track.
Part 2. The Sun, Moon and the Stars. Genesis 1:14-19 says, And God said, Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days, and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and it was so. And God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness, and God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the 4th day. So this is what we have. Heaven at the top. Waters under heaven. The firmament under the water. The sun, moon and the stars, in the firmament. Water under the firmament. Part 3, Stars in the Dome. Psalm 19:1 says, The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Singer-songwriter Carmen recognized this to be true when he wrote the lyrics to the song, There is a God, with these words. When the fool said in his heart, There is no God, he rejects the truth God painted on the canvas of the night. Much like Michelangelo's painting of the Sistine Chapel, God placed the sun, the moon and the stars in the firmament dome. This can be easily seen using time-lapse photography. Part 4, Stars Fall. Matthew 24 and 29 says, "Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken." Mark 13 and 25 says, "And the stars of heaven shall fall, and the powers that are in heaven shall be shaken." And Revelation 6 and 13 says, "And the stars of heaven fell unto the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs, when she is shaken of a mighty wind." When stars fall, we call them meteorites. Part 5, The Still Earth. Chronicles 16 and 30 says, "The world also shall be stable, that it be not moved." Psalm 96 and 10 says, "The world also shall be established, that it shall not be moved." And Psalm 93 and 1 says, "The world also stablished, that it cannot be moved." This is what NASA wants us to believe. Earth orbiting the Sun, our solar system hurtling through the Milky Way. God, however, says different. The next two videos are about gyroscopes. The first video shows how they work, but according to the US Navy, need constant adjusting. The second video proves that the Earth does not move using a gyroscope, the very instrument NASA tells us the Earth does indeed move.
To understand any gyroscopic instrument, you must understand the principle of the gyroscope. It consists of a rotor mounted in a gimbal. The rotor can spin in one plane only. When another gimbal is added, a second plane of movement is possible. And when this assembly is mounted in bearings, the rotor has three planes of movement and can assume any possible attitude. This is now a freely mounted gyroscope. A spinning gyro has two important properties: precession and rigidity in space. All of its practical applications are based on these two properties. As for rigidity in space, the spinning rotor remains in its original attitude, while the gimbals and base move around it. In other words, the gyro maintains its axis in relation to space and not to the surface of the Earth. If a gyro moves around the Earth, its axis is vertical to the Earth's surface here, at an angle here, and horizontal here. The other type, known as apparent drift, relates to rigidity in space. Once again, consider this condition. The gyro maintains its attitude while the Earth turns under it. Every 6 hours, the gyro drifts through 90 degrees in relation to the Earth's surface.
Can you repeat the part of this stuff where you said all about the things?
Every 6 hours, the gyro drifts through 90 degrees in relation to the Earth's surface. In order for the gyro instrument to be dependable, drift must be corrected continuously, 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 continuously.
Okay, so this is the setup I'm going to be using. You'll notice this side, there's like a blanking insert that goes into the bearing housing on this side. And on this side you attach the motor, so the hole is empty, just with the spindle sticking through. So I quickly realised that when I spun this thing up, due to the presence of material here and the absence of material here, there was a weight imbalance. So I contacted the manufacturer and asked them if this is expected, and they confirmed it was, and offered to make me a one-off insert to go in here for free. But they also suggested that what I could do is use some Play-Doh, some kids' plasticine. So I did that. I got some of my daughter's Play-Doh, just spun it up to speed with the motor, and then inserted this into the hole. That seemed to do the trick. I was able to balance it perfectly. Before I put this in, the extra weight caused this side to drop every time, and if it was over here, it would drop this way. So that's how I overcame that. I've attached the whole setup to a protractor, which I've blue tacked to the table, and I've blue tacked the actual the frame to the table as well. So this here is the angle that we're looking for. So what we're looking for is this effect. See how the gyro wants to rotate and stay in the original orientation? Well, that angle that it's rotating, that this bar appears to be rotating over the vise, that is the angle that we're looking for. That is the angle that we should be able to calculate this gyroscope moving due to the rotation of the earth underneath us. So without further ado, let's get on to the test. So I've just attached the motor there. It actually takes 4 AA batteries to power it, and I've run this test quite a number of times now and put quite a few batteries through it, so I kind of know how long they're going to last and what sort of sound comes from the motor, depending on how much power is left in the batteries. And I'd say there's about probably 75% power left in them at the minute, and that's based on 12,000 RPM maximum. That's probably about 8,000 or 9,000 RPM for this particular test. So it's getting up to speed now. We're going to remove the motor and replace it with the piece of Play-Doh to get it perfectly balanced. And now I'm going to demonstrate some precession by gently pressing on the horizontal bar there. And now I'm going to line it up as best I can, so that you cannot see the brass flywheel from above, and it's as sort of straight up and down as possible. So if we just take note of where we are now, at you can see a 0 on the top right, just to the right of the bar. You can see a 0 just there, and you'll note that you cannot see the brass flywheel from above now. So we are sort of dead centre above it. So now it's just a waiting game. So while we wait, let's just have a look at a brief history of the gyroscope, up to the point where it was first proposed that it could record the spin of the Earth. So this is just sort of one example that I found on the internet. There are lots and lots of different accounts, and they all differ slightly, but this one seemed like a sort of all-round recount of history. So in early times, people discovered the spinning top, a toy with a unique ability to balance upright while rotating rapidly. Ancient Greek, Chinese and Roman societies built tops for games and entertainment. The Maori in New Zealand have used humming tops with specially crafted holes in mourning ceremonies. In 14th century England, some villages had a large top constructed for a warming up exercise in cold weather. Tops were even used in place of dice. It was not until the late 18th and 19th centuries that scientists and sailors began attempting to use spinning tops as a scientific tool. At the time, sailors relied on sextants for navigation, measuring the angle between specific stars and the horizon. This method was limited, however, if choppy seas or fog obscured the true horizon, or clouds obscured the stars. Serson, an English scientist, noted in the 1740s that the spinning top had a tendency to remain level, even when the surface on which it rested was tilting. He suggested that sailors could use it as an artificial horizon on ships. Unfortunately, when Serson went to sea to test the idea, the ship sank and everyone was lost. A French scientist in the 19th century, Fleury, created a top that was continuously powered by air jets, blowing into mini buckets on the rim of the wheel, a process that had been used for thousands of gyros since. The first modern gyroscope was designed in the early 1800s by Johann Gottlieb Friedrich von Bernberger, a professor at the University of Tübingen in Germany. It was made with a heavy ball instead of a wheel, but since it had no scientific application, it faded into history. In the mid-19th century, the spinning top acquired the name gyroscope, though not through its use as a navigational tool. French scientist Léon Foucault had experimented with a long, heavy pendulum in an attempt to observe the rotation of the Earth. The pendulum was set swinging back and forth along the north-south plane, while the Earth turned beneath it. Foucault corroborated the observation by using a spinning top in a similar manner. He placed a wheel, rotating at high speed, in a supporting ring in such a way that the axis of the spinning wheel could move independently of the ring. In fact, the supporting ring moved over the course of a day, as it was connected to the surface of the rotating Earth. The axis of the wheel remained pointed in its original direction, confirming that the Earth was rotating in a 24-hour period. Foucault named his spinning wheel a gyroscope, from the Greek words gyros, which is revolution, and skopin, which is to see. He had seen the revolution of the Earth with his gyroscope. So, from Wikipedia, Jean-Bernard Léon Foucault, born 18th of September 1819, was a French physicist best known for his demonstration of the Foucault pendulum, a device demonstrating the effect of the Earth's rotation. He also made an early measurement of the speed of light, discovered eddy currents, and is credited with naming the gyroscope, although he did not invent it. Foucault was the son of a publisher in Paris, where he was born. After an education received chiefly at home, he studied medicine, which he had abandoned in favour of physics due to a blood phobia. He first directed his attention to the improvement of Louis Daguerre's photographic processes. For 3 years he was experimental assistant to Alfred Donné in his course of lectures on microscopic anatomy. In 1851 he provided an experimental demonstration of the rotation of Earth on its axis and became well known to the public by Foucault's work. Foucault achieved the demonstration by showing the rotation of the plane of oscillation of a long and heavy pendulum suspended from the roof of the Pantheon in Paris. The experiment caused a sensation in both the learned and popular worlds, and Foucault pendulums were suspended in major cities across Europe and America, attracting large crowds. In the following year, he used and named the gyroscope as conceptually simpler experimental proof. In 1855 he received the Copley Medal of the Royal Society for his very remarkable experimental researches. In 1862 Foucault was made a member of the Bureau de Longitudes and an officer at the Legion of Honour. He became a member of the Royal Society of London in 1864 and a member of the mechanical section of the Institute a year later. He is also credited with determining the speed of light to be 298,000 km per second, which is only 0.6% in error of the currently accepted value, and devising a method of testing the mirror of a reflecting telescope to determine its shape. So, reading between the lines, he was a man of significant academic accomplishment and recognition at the time. One has to wonder then why, when you read the Wikipedia article about Léon Foucault, does it have this one line at the end? Near his death, he returned to Roman Catholicism that he had previously abandoned. Draw your own conclusions. So going back to the test, we've exceeded 6 minutes now and there's no observable movement. You can still see the zero to the right of the bar in its entirety, and you still cannot see the brass flywheel from above. So how much should the gyro have precessed? What angle should the gyro's axis have moved? The calculation is the sine of the latitude times 15 degrees per hour. My current latitude is exactly 53.06 degrees north. So the angle in which the gyro should have moved in 6 minutes is 1.2 degrees. Now this doesn't sound a lot, but let's assume that Léon Foucault's experiments were performed in Paris. He should have seen even less based on his latitude. And let's not forget that he didn't have an electric motor spinning his gyro up to 9,000 RPM. So I'm just going to stop it now. You saw then that there was still plenty of energy left in that flywheel, and it was able to precess when I moved it.
Part 6, The Four Corners and the Pillars. Isaiah 11 and 12 says 4 corners of the earth. Revelation 7 and 1 says 4 corners of the earth. Revelation 20 and 8 says 4 corners of the earth. 1 Samuel 2 and 8 says, For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and he hath set the world upon them. Job 9 and 6 says, And the pillars thereof tremble. Psalm 75 and 3 says, I bear up the pillars of it. You cannot have corners or pillars on a globe, but you can on a flat earth. Part 7, Footstool. Acts 7 and 49 states, Heaven is my throne, and earth is my footstool. This is a classic footstool. It has 4 corners and 4 pillars. How can you confuse that with this? Part 8, Words from the Prophet.
You can get accuracy in science now. I know some time ago they told us that when the Bible said that he saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, that couldn't be. The earth was round. But the Bible said 4 corners. Well, now you've seen 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago it's been now, the papers packing this article. They found out that the world is square. How many have seen that? See, I got it all copied off. You just wait for somebody to say something. And they're going to find out someday that they're not seeing 150 million years of light space either. They're going right around the circle. So exactly.
Part 9, The Sun Moves. There are 67 Bible verses that tell us that it is the sun that moves, not the earth. One such compilation can be found at fixedearth.com. At the same time, you won't find one verse that describes the earth moving. Part 10, Sun Circuit. Psalm 19 and 4 says, Their line is gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them hath he set a tabernacle for the sun. And Psalm 19 and 6 says, His going forth is from the end of the heaven, and his circuit unto the ends of it, and there is nothing hid from the heat thereof. Strong's Concordance defines H5362, a revolution, that is the sun course, of time-lapse, circuit, come about, end.
The Earth. Is it really just a big ball floating in space? Spinning on its axis at 1,000 miles per hour? Hurtling around the sun at 67,000 miles per hour? Whizzing through the Milky Way at a milk-curdling speed of over 500,000 miles per hour? And warp driving through the heaven at over 500 million miles per hour? And what about the sun? Is it really 93 million miles away and close to 1 million miles in diameter, with a circumference of nearly 3 million miles? And it's constantly illuminating half of our entire Earth's surface with the rotation of the Earth, creating our 24-hour days, our night and days? Or, shh, the Earth is flat. And maybe it's completely still, just like we experience. And maybe the sun isn't big, but is very small and very close, and not illuminating the Earth from 93 million miles, but is illuminating locally. And maybe everything, the sun, moon, and stars, are not far away, but are circling overhead relatively close. In this video, we're going to explore the latter option, and at the end, we're going to reveal startling evidence through the use of time-lapse photography that the sun cannot possibly be 93 million miles away, but is in fact very close and is illuminating locally as it traverses our flat Earth. Oh man, and watch how this sun comes at you. Boom! I mean, come on. And that's all perspective. If you look at jet trails, Google Images, you'll see them. They start out low at the horizon, they come up overhead. Look at that thing. They come up overhead and then they go down to the horizon. Perfectly explains what the sun would do. Here it is going overhead. I love time lapse. And look at this. You can't go out and look at the sun. You can't see this stuff, except that it's on, time lapse like this. It's incredible. Now watch this thing. It's sweeping. The sun over flat Earth is doing a big circle, right? Look at this thing. See it sweeping to the right? It's like a lefty bowler. Just toss that down the alley, and there it goes, hooking into the pocket. You can see how the clouds angle down to the horizon. I shot it there. That's exactly how the sun would do on flat Earth. Okay, back to the Copernican principle, and this is what they tell us. The sun is 93 million miles away. Now, I'm going to show you evidence through sunsets that shows the sun light following the sun over the horizon, and it shrinks as it goes over. Now, there's no way it would do that if the sun is 93 million miles away. Okay, first I'm going to show you some footage from the ISS. Okay, now watch this animation. Watch this sunset. Now this is exactly, if they came to me and said, do an animation, this is how I would do it. If the sun were 93 million miles away. Just like that. Have the whole horizon fade evenly. But that's not what we see. Okay, wow, look at that. Look how the light lifts off the ground like a big wedge, or like lifting up a sheet of paper. That's incredible footage. Definitely the light's following the sun, right? Okay, next I'm going to show you how a sun that is circling over the Earth, that creates the horizontal aspect of the sun. If you combine that with perspective, which creates the up and down of the sun, the rising and the setting, you get the 23.5 degree tilt that they talk about. It's nothing but perspective and the circling sun. Here's another sun sweeping out a big circle. Okay, here's a phenomenon that you might be wondering, how in the heck do you explain this on a flat Earth? Well, this footage is taken from Alaska during the summer, and the sun does look like it's going up and down. The reason it's doing that is that this town in Alaska is not in the center of the sun's circular circuit. In other words, the sun is making a big circle, and the town is not in the center of that circle. So the sun will be closer and further from the viewer with the camera. That will cause it to go higher and lower, and also maybe even bigger and smaller. Look at the high altitude airplane. Remember, this is from a high altitude balloon, so that airplane is probably at cruising altitude. Notice how it looks like it's going up from the horizon. That's exactly how the sun will rise, because that plane is staying parallel to the ground. And now watch, it'll go down to the other horizon. All right, again, perspective, that's how the sun will set. And forget the big ball, that's just due to a GoPro camera. But see how the sun, that's the point of this. And then also, look at the size of the sun, man. Look at that thing. I mean, there's something to it to say that we're higher up our view and the sun looks bigger, and it looks like it's not as high in the sky as it does when we're on the ground. Something to that. Let's explore this notion a bit further, that the sun looks bigger when filmed from higher up. The next 3 slides, I'm going to do a comparison, a side by side. The one on the left, the camera is above the clouds. The camera on the right is ground level. And the point for the side by side comparison from the ground level and the level above the clouds is that above the clouds we're only maybe a mile or so up. And if the sun appears to be closer to the camera, well, that means it's probably much closer, because if the sun were 93 million miles away, a mile closer wouldn't make any difference at all to its visual appearance. Okay, here's a little illustrator or a little cartoon from a website called timeanddate.com. It's really funny that they would have a perfect illustration of a sun rising and setting on a flat earth due to perspective. You'll notice that it rises from below the horizon and sets below the horizon. Now you might be saying, well, how's that possible? I can see now you're saying that it rises and lowers due to perspective, but how does it disappear below the horizon? Well, I got a theory about that. Because of the fact that all parallel lines and planes converge at your eye level horizon, this is according to the perspective, I'm not making this up. If in fact, and they do, they converge at your eye level horizon visually, then it makes sense that after that point they diverge, meaning they then separate, so the sun would continue on a downward track. As you can see from my illustration here, the lines would go to your horizon, and then afterwards they would spread out and separate, kind of like a starburst, and the starburst being at your horizon, at your focal point. Anyway, without further ado, we're going to start talking about, and I'm going to start showing you the time lapse of the sunsets that I'm talking about that clearly show the sun is close and illuminating locally. Here we go. Alright, and here are a couple of time-lapse sunsets, and just like the sunrises at the beginning of this video where you could see the sun coming at you, not maintaining any 93 million mile distance, here you can also see the sun moving away, and it's clearly not due to the rotation of the Earth and a sun that's maintaining 93 million miles away, but the sun is moving over the Earth and moving away from you. Okay, these next three slides, the sun is almost set already behind the horizon, but watch as the sunlight shrinks and follows the sun. It's definitely a locally illuminating sun, not far away, not very big, and definitely not 93 million miles away. Okay, remember this video from the beginning of the video? I showed you this one and how it's circling over the Earth, and watch it sweep to the right like a bowler bowling it in there for a strike. Okay, now I want you to pay attention to the way the light follows the sun. The sunlight's going to shrink, right, as it follows the locally illuminating sun. Now watch this. See it shrinking, following the sun? You do not get that if the sun is 93 million miles away. The entire horizon should fade evenly, just like this supposed shot taken from space of the Earth. You can clearly see the way they depict it. They depict the demarcation between day and night, or light and dark, as a long straight line. And you can see the long straight line moving as one solid piece. That means that the sunset should all fade, the entire horizon should fade evenly. But that's not what we observe, as we will see and as we've seen in the footage so far. The sunlight shrinks and follows the sun over the horizon. So these time-lapse sunsets are definitely the nail in the coffin for heliocentrism. But this particular one here, shot from above the clouds from this observatory, is the final nail in the coffin. Look at how the sun just shrinks and the light shrinks to nothing. That cannot happen, as I showed you in the when the sun illuminates the entire Earth, which it does from 93 million miles away. It has to. You don't get this isolated look at the sunlight trailing the sun. That's only possible with a small sun, close, not very high, illuminating locally. I mean, if this isn't proof to you, then you gotta take the blinders off. Okay, and finally I want to show you some examples of local illumination, or a city in the background. This is from Grand Canyon National Park. You can see Las Vegas is one of them. You can see the stars going down, so you know that's not the sun. That's the glow of Las Vegas, it says. You can see that's local illumination. I'm just making an example showing you here's Tuba City and a little bit of Flagstaff. Now, in this one here, you see two lights. Obviously, we don't have two suns, but these are two cities lit up, and it's just to show it looks just like the sun going over the horizon. That's the point of me showing that. That's local illumination at work. The sun is not 93 million miles away, because if it was, the entire horizon would fade evenly, and the entire horizon would fade at the same time. Not what we see here, which is the small sun cruising over the earth and the light is following it. Case closed.
The earth is flat, living in illusion. The earth is flat. We take some illusion. The earth is flat, living in illusion. So people don't know what to do. The earth is flat, living in illusion. The earth is flat, staging illusion. The earth is flat, living in illusion.
Part 11. Above the earth. Isaiah 40 and 22 says, "It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth." Circle. Ball. Part 12. Science by NASA. We are told by NASA that the ISS and most satellites orbit in the thermosphere. If you Google temperature in the thermosphere, you'll get, and I quote, "Temperatures in the upper thermosphere can range from about 500 degrees Celsius or 932 degrees Fahrenheit to 2000 degrees Celsius, or 3632 degrees Fahrenheit, or higher," end quote. There is a problem here. According to the periodic table, aluminum melts at 660.25 degrees Celsius. Can you guess what metal rockets and satellites are derived from? Even if they are heat-treated, they cannot withstand 2000 degrees Celsius, which is equivalent to a blast furnace. Part 13. The Bedford Level Experiment.
In the summer of 1838, Samuel Burley Rowbottom performed what has become known as the Bedford Level Experiment. Standing in the middle of the Bedford Level Canal with a telescope, he was able to watch a friend row a boat along the length of the perfectly straight canal for 6 miles, where the boat should have been 16 feet below the horizon, thus proving that the earth is flat.
More undeniable proof. The Bedford Level Experiment was redone in 2016, and guess what? They got the same result. A laser was used over the surface of Lake Balaton, in Hungary. They did 4 measurements on the 15th and 16th of August 2016, and found no noticeable curve. My sister-in-law took the following picture of the CN Tower from Oshawa, over 63 kilometers or 39 miles away. The tower is not on an angle, and is perfectly vertical, and is totally visible. This is scientifically impossible on a globe. CN Tower, from Oshawa. Part 14. NASA keeps their lies alive.
NASA recently celebrated their 50-year anniversary of the first American spacewalk. But let's set the stage. March 18, 1965, the Soviets were already kicking our butts in nearly every milestone. Alexei Leninov aboard the Voskhod 2 became the first person to perform a spacewalk. The space race had been well underway, and NASA and the Americans were coming up short to their Soviet rivals.
8.5 G's, you're really being pushed into the seat, and all of a sudden, it stops. You're floating. It's a lot of fun.
The crew went through the preparation process. They reported we were ready. I had a tracking station make sure that all of the safety criteria had been met, and this was now okay to open up the hatch.
Okay, we're giving you a go for your EVA at this time.
Okay.
Roger, flight, let's go. Okay.
After we got the hatch open, Ed stood up in the seat and they got ready to go, and we cleared him to go, and then he took and pushed off from the seat.
Okay, my feet are out. I think I'm dragging a little bit, so I don't want to fire the gun yet. Okay, I'm separating from the spacecraft.
Ed White is flying at 17,000 miles per hour, 200 miles above the Earth.
Okay, I'm out.
If the spacesuit fails, the difference in pressure will kill him instantly. If the lifeline fails, he'll literally be lost in space.
The only thing to do would be to disconnect them and let them float around out there. I mean, it was, these are things that's in everybody's mind. We don't have a plan. We don't have a checklist on how you kill your best friend.
As White floats in space, a glove drifts out of the capsule.
Looks like a thermal glove, Jim.
I don't even know whose glove it was. I don't know whether it was his or mine.
I feel like $1 million.
Today, those pictures are a classic. They're still overpowering today to realize, number one, it's been done, and that we did it. It blew me away.
This is the greatest experience. It's just tremendous.
Here's where I think the animators got carried away with creative license. The astronauts' helmets don't swivel. They are fixed to an airtight ring base, which is sewn to nearly 1/4 of an inch of multiply fabric, nylon, and mylar. Once pressurized, it becomes very stiff. Here we have the original footage of the actual EVA. It was taken on 16mm film reel, 440 feet long, which works out to be 12 minutes at 24 frames per second. A camera that can hold a 7-inch reel is fairly large, and we don't see anything that matches the description in the archives, or pre-flight equipment manifest. The news outlets that reported on the equipment that went up with the astronauts pulled sources from earlier press releases and blended them with the latest flight info, because a lot of the technical details were still hush-hush, which is why the stories ran nearly 3 weeks after the event. Even the home movie cameras of the day had 3 selections of 16, 18, and 24 frames per second. As we shall see later on, the handheld camera took footage of what appears to be 18 frames per second. But when filming the EVA, NASA chose to use a 7-inch reel of 440 feet of film. This would allow for 12 minutes of footage.
The flight plan called for EVA to begin on the second orbit. Somewhere over Hawaii, the pilot was to open the hatch of a depressurized cabin and stand up. Over the west coast of the United States, he would leave the spacecraft and expose himself to space. For 12 minutes, he would perform maneuvers over the United States. He would return to Gemini 4 and continue the mission as the spacecraft neared the night side of the Earth over the Atlantic. This was the flight plan. During the final 2 days of the mission, Command Pilot McDivitt took a series of formal and informal motion picture shots with a 16mm camera mounted at the pilot's window. The camera turns inward. For a brief moment, we are able to ride tourist class with Gemini 4, watching the crew at work. We catch a glimpse of a space sunrise, flaring in brilliant color over the Earth's horizon. Using the same camera, McDivitt photographed ground objects, including this small island in the Gulf of Mexico off the Texas coast. On another occasion, he photographed approaches to Yuma, Arizona. The detail seen here shows great promise for scientific exploration of the Earth, heretofore impossible. Using this technique, we could chart the major currents of the ocean, study weather patterns, and map the geology of the Earth.
Hey everybody, this is Luke from Flat Earth Consequences, and I wanted to discuss something that caught my ear a while back, and I've never seen it illustrated, so just look at what I'm going to show you, and bear with me and tell me what you think about this, because it makes an awful lot of sense to me. Okay, so we've all seen the shadow of the Tom and Jerry where the mouse comes into the room and he scares the cat, but the cat looks at him and realizes it's a mouse. It's normal that objects cast shadows bigger than themselves the farther the shadow is from the object that's projecting the shadow. Here's an illustration of how that works. You have a light source, you have an object, in this case a sphere, and then you have a surface on which the shadow is cast. Now if you notice, when the object isn't right up against the surface, the shadow is bigger than the object. We've all seen this, and we can duplicate it ourselves easily. You can use a quarter, a ping pong paddle, headlights of your car, and a garage door. You see it in the real world all the time. Look at this picture here. The sun has swung around to our region. The light is being cast over the peak of this mountain, and look at the shadow. The farther away it is, the wider it gets, because that is how it works in nature. That's what's duplicatable. That's what can be demonstrated, and this is notice that the shadow is never smaller than the object. But explain this. This is supposedly an image from space of an eclipse over Mexico. And if you look at a map, you can see that's 50 or maybe 60 miles across. Hard to say, but it's not a quarter the size of the Earth. But could the moon cast a shadow smaller than itself? Look at this illustration. If the ball is right up against the surface, the shadow is the exact same size. And if it gets farther away, the edges might become blurry, and the shadow can actually be bigger than the object, but it can't be smaller. So how can you explain that something 250,000 miles away, a quarter the size of the Earth, casts a shadow 50 miles across right there? And they could probably come up with some fantastical math to try to explain it, but even when you look at a chart that shows you where the eclipse is, look at the width of this band. I mean, look at the northwest part of it. If it went right over Salem, you couldn't even see a partial eclipse from Eugene or Portland. That's only about a 45-minute, maybe an hour drive. So that is, maybe an hour and a half. But nonetheless, look at the size of the path. So when they show you this, don't you scratch your head for a minute and go, how is that possible? The shadow is the same size as the object in all scientific demonstrations. Now, when they show you one of their baloney illustrations and say, no, this is the magic. Look, the sun is so big it encompasses everything around it, and the light just kind of shoots itself up underneath the moon and makes a spot smaller than the moon. But actually, that is the exact opposite of what you really find in the real world. If the eclipse spot in this image was the light source, the shadow would be the size of the sun. It's the opposite. Look at the picture again. Light source, object, and shadow, which is bigger than the object unless the object is right up against the surface upon which it is casting the shadow. And we all know that light travels straight. If these two sticks were sundials, the light would have to be straight or your sundials would never be accurate. And yet, what they want to do is tell you that somehow, even though the sun's 93 million miles away from us and it's 92,750,000 miles away from the moon, it does this. That is a joke. This next image is from a University of Montana, and they tried to replicate what they claim happens with this model. On the right you have the Earth, then you have the moon, then they inserted a light diffuser, and that light diffuser is between the light source and the moon. So you can see that somehow the shadow is manipulated in such a way that it looks like it's a little bit smaller in the middle, a little hazy around the edge. And this is what they tell us that eclipses do. But in the real world, where's the diffuser? There's supposedly an Earth, a moon, empty space for 93 million miles, and then a light source. This is the exact same model without the diffuser. This is what really exists: the Earth and a moon and a light source. And notice that because the moon is not right up against the Earth, the shadow on the Earth there is bigger than the moon. So how does that work? That means that the path of an eclipse should be way bigger than what they're showing you in the official model. But when you look at a map like this, it shows you the bandwidth of the shadow, and it is very small. Even the actual images that aren't just a map like this will show you that the spot that the sun leaves is small. This is an official photo from NASA or a satellite of the shadow of an eclipse. This is the problem, though. How do you take this? You have the Earth, 8,000 miles in diameter, about, a little bigger, and you have the moon, which is 2,000 miles in diameter, or bigger, 31 times the diameter of the Earth toward the sun, blocking the light. And they're telling us that we get this little spot. Now, we know how shadows work. All you have to do is just play around with some light and an object. We know how the model of shadows work. The farther away the shadow is projected away from the object, the bigger it gets. But they tell you, you take this, and somehow, miraculously, you get this. That's all I'm saying. Think that one over. So there you have it. I made my point. Tell me if that makes sense to you. Everybody looks at the moon and discusses the eclipses from the Earth's perspective, but I haven't heard anybody discuss what eclipses look like from up there down to the Earth. So this is Luke signing off from Flat Earth Consequences. I hope you have a great day, and I'll be seeing you soon.
Summary. I did not cover every scripture in the Bible about the earth, nor did I cover all the evidence showing a flat earth. It keeps coming in. Oh, some searching yourself. And ask yourself this question. Do you believe God, or man? Romans 3:4 says, God forbid, yea, let God be true, but every man a liar. Joshua 24:15 says, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. The earth is flat.
Kill the light real quick.